like to welcome John Perkins. So John Perkins was formerly the chief economist at a major international consulting firm where he advised the World Bank, the United Nations, the IMF, the U.S. Treasury Department, Fortune 500 corporations, and leaders of countries in Africa, Asia, Latin America, and Middle East. Wow. John's latest book, The New Confessions of an Economic Hitman, is the follow-up to his New York Times bestseller and features 15 explosive new chapters and brings the story of the economic hitmen and the jackal assassins chillingly home to the U.S. I remember when I first became aware of John's work, actually Jordan Pease at Rogue Valley Metaphysical Library had made me aware of John, and when his first book came out, I went to see his lecture at the Powell's bookstore in Portland, Oregon. If any of you have been up there, it's a massive bookstore, and John pretty much sold out the place. It was standing room only. And I tell you, something that really moved me was how John confronted himself and his own role in the shenanigans that had been going on in the economic scene, and having the bravery to acknowledge that publicly so that we could learn. And I just want to let you know I appreciate that. So it's your stage.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Joel. Thank all of you. And thank you, architects of a new paradigm. Thank you. Yes, big round of applause. So, I can't see any of you out there, but hopefully you can see me. Okay. So I got to say, you know, what's going on here today, everything we've been hearing here today, this morning, has been about the biggest revolution in the history of the world. We are participating in, we're really at the beginning, but we're into it now. We're at the biggest revolution human beings have ever experienced, bigger than the Industrial Revolution or the Agricultural Revolution, the American Revolution, the Sexual Revolution. This is a revolution of consciousness. Yeah, we're waking up. Are you waking up? Do you feel awake? That's meager. Do you feel awake? All right, that's better. All across the world. You know, I feel blessed that I get the opportunity to travel all across this amazing planet that we live on, speaking a great deal. And everywhere I go, I find that people truly are waking up to who we are as a human species on this planet. We are going through this revolution. Gary Zukav, who's a neighbor of yours here in this community, I think he's out there in the audience someplace, has called this the first step in the new human evolution. And I think we're all understanding that we are truly waking up to the fact that we've created a failed system. We have created terrible crises on this planet. We've also created amazing things. You know, the fact we're all here, the fact we're using these technologies. We've created incredible science, medicine, technology of all kinds, art, everything, music. And we've gone too far, and we're recognizing that the oceans are rising, the glaciers are melting. 8 people have as much wealth as half the world's population. And that half of the world is starving or on the verge of starvation. We know that we've created a failed system and we must change it. So that's what we're doing. That's why we're here, because you're going to change the system, right? And it's easy, actually, because it's all about perception. Consciousness revolution, all about perception. You know, I like to think of how there's really 2 kinds of reality. There's the objective reality, this microphone. And there's a perceived reality, the words I'm speaking through this microphone. When you think about it, there's no United States, there's no Russia, there's no China, there's no Canada, there's no culture, there's no religion, there's nothing except as we perceive it. And when enough people perceive something or codify it into law, it impacts objective reality. Then we create a United States, a China, and so on, but it's all perception. So in 1976, in one moment, there was a change in perceived reality that's caused the crises. And I'm going to go into that in a few minutes. And now we can turn that around, and that's what we're doing here as the architects for a new paradigm. That's why we're all here. Before I go into that in more detail, I want to share with you a personal story that I think will put some of this into perspective. It's a true story. It's a little funny, so you're allowed to laugh. I wasn't laughing at the time, though. So many years ago, when I graduated from business school, I decided I didn't want to go to Vietnam, and I joined the Peace Corps. The Peace Corps sent me to Ecuador. And the next thing I know, I'm on this rickety old bus, spending 2 days driving up over the Andes from Quito, Ecuador, down to the end of the road because I'm being assigned to the Amazon, to the Shuar people in the Amazon. So a 2-day ride in this rickety old bus to the end of the road, and now I got to walk for 2 days through dense jungle to get to the place where I'm going to spend the next 2 years. Well, the Peace Corps had sent me to 8 weeks of training to learn Spanish, which if any of you speak another language, you know 8 weeks ain't a lot of time. And also to learn about credit and savings co-ops because I graduated from business school. So as I'm walking through this jungle path into this deep jungle for 2 days, there's some people walking out. And I decide that I'll practice my lousy Spanish on them. To my chagrin, I discover that my Spanish is a whole lot better than theirs. They're Shuar. They speak Shuar. First experience with the U.S. government, they teach you a language and send you someplace where nobody speaks it. And I'm getting really homesick now. I'm like, geez, like I'm crying, walking through the rainforest so nobody can tell I'm crying. And I'm thinking, damn, I wish I'd gone to Vietnam. They speak English there. Anyway, I finally get to the village where I'm going to spend a community, really, it's not a village, community where I'm going to spend the next 2 years. And there's one guy there who I can communicate with. He's a school teacher. He's from up in the Andes. And I say to him, hey, I'm here to help you guys form your credit and savings co-ops. Yeah, he looks at me and he says, credit and savings? Are you crazy? Like, we don't have any money here. It's my bananas for your papayas. It's all barter. What are you doing here? You can't form a credit and savings co-op here, My second experience with U.S. government work. So, anyway, I grew up in New Hampshire. I come from over 300 years of Yankee Calvinists. We're the original Puritans, And if there's one thing that we're taught in life when we're young, from the time I'm just a little tiny kid, is, by God, when you're sent in to do a job, you do it. So the Peace Corps sent me in with, incidentally, I don't have a clock going here, so I guess I've got the whole afternoon. Let me know at least 15 minutes ahead of time, okay? Anyway, so here I am. I'm sent into the jungle with this backpack filled with comic books in color, in Spanish, about the benefits of forming credit and savings co-ops. These were produced by the United States Information Service. USIS, better known as useless. My third experience with U.S. government work. Anyway, I've got this bag of comic books, and I've got a job to do because I'm a Calvinist, So every morning as the people disappear into the forest to do whatever they're going to do in the forest, I get up really early with them, and I hand out these comic books. And they all take them. And they go into the forest with them. And when they come out, they don't have them. So I figure they're starting a library in there. They're having their own, they're having their own get-togethers, and then they're all sitting around discussing how to. Anyway, every evening I got up in front of the community, and in my lousy Spanish, I gave a little talk about the benefits of credit and savings co-ops, because that was my job. What else was I going to do? And a funny thing happened. More and more people kept showing up. And it got to a point where people were walking for hours through the jungle to come and hear me talk. And they had to go back late at night in the dark, and they didn't have flashlights. And I'm thinking, thanks, Calvin, or whoever you are. Thank you, Mom and Dad. This is going to work. And then one morning, the school teacher, the guy who can communicate with me, takes me aside and he says, "Hey, have you noticed we don't have any radios or televisions here, no electricity. We don't have any newspapers or magazines." Nobody could read, they were illiterate. He says, "You're it." Saturday Night Live, every night. The word had gone out. There's this tall, gangly, blonde, I was blonder then than I am now, gringo stands up in front of us and he talks on and on and on and in a language none of us understand. And the one guy who can understand him says he doesn't speak the language well anyway, and whatever he says makes absolutely no sense to any of us. So he's not long for this world. He doesn't know how to shoot a blowgun or track a jaguar. He's going to be gone soon. You better come and see him. Perception. We're talking about perception here. I had this strange perception of their world. They had a strange perception of my world. But at that point, my perception changed, and I understood I had all my years of vaunted education had nothing to offer these people. But they had so much to teach me about perception, about the perception of how we live with nature. They worship, everything. Everything has spirit. The trees have spirit. The rivers are this beautiful goddess named Sunki. The earth is another beautiful goddess named Nunkwi. The forest is a handsome god named Shakaim. Everything has spirit. And this was news to me. But they were teaching me this. It was an amazing experience to suddenly be with people who have a very different perception, a very different consciousness of what it is to be human on this planet. It was an amazing experience. And then I got really sick. I lost a tremendous amount of weight in a very short period of time. And I couldn't possibly get to the nearest medical facility. 2 days walk through the dense jungle, another 2 days in a rickety old bus. There's no way. So I was resigned to dying, essentially. Late one afternoon, the school teacher comes up to me. He's leading this little tiny Schwa man, this old man by the hand, and little guy. And he says, "This guy is the shaman." This is 1969. I'm from New Hampshire. What the hell's a shaman, He can heal you. Well, that got my attention. So this little old guy, he stands back, he looks at my feet, he looks at my head, he scans my body, and he steps up real close to me. He's short, and he wags his finger in my face, and he looks very, very serious. He's going to pronounce something really important that's going to save my life, and he says, "You're dying." And that's good, he said. At that point, I think I started crying. That's good, he said, because the Shwa believe in reincarnation. And this guy felt my life was about as bad as it could possibly get. Time to become an anaconda or a jaguar or an ayahuasca plant or something or other. Just get on with it, kid. Move on, But I'm crying here, and so he looks at me and he kind of says, "Well, shit." I don't think he said shit, but it was all being translated. Anyway, he says, "Well, damn, maybe you're not ready to die, in which case I could cure you tonight." So I said, "Yeah, I'll take that." And he did. That night he took me on this classic shamanic journey. It involved what nobody ever heard of in those days. It's become a big thing these days, ayahuasca, but I had no idea what this bitter stuff I was drinking was. But on that journey, what happened was that night I saw that I'd been raised in a very hygienic family, washed our hands a lot, and we ate very bland foods up in New Hampshire, meat and potatoes, nothing very interesting. And suddenly I'm living with people who've never seen a bar of soap, and they never drink water. Amazonian people don't drink water because the rivers all have organic matter. They know that from the trees, etc. So they drink this kind of beer that they call chicha that's made from the women chewing manioc root and spitting it. It ferments, it becomes a kind of alcohol, and then you can add water. Spit beer. And I'm drinking a lot of spit beer because there wasn't any Perrier. And I'm eating a lot of squirming white grubs and other kinds of foods that they consider delicacies that I didn't consider delicacy. But there weren't any Cliff Bars. So I'm eating a lot of this stuff and drinking this stuff. And on that journey that night, that shamanic journey, I saw that every time I was eating or drinking this stuff, a voice, probably my mother, was saying, "Son, it'll kill you." At the same time, I saw how incredibly healthy the Shuar are. The men, they kill wild boars in the forest, 300 pounds, carry them out. They've got legs that would make World Cup soccer stars jealous. And the women, I was in my early 20s, the women were looking real good. And people would live to be very, very old if they weren't killed in a hunting accident or a tree falling on them or something which happens to hunters and gatherers. So on that journey, I saw that what was killing me was not the food or drink, it was my perception, my mindset. Because that same food and drink were making them healthy. I had this incredible transformation. The next morning I woke up and I was healthy. And a few days later, the shaman comes up to me and he says, "I healed you. You owe me." And his requirement was that I become his apprentice, which in 1969, there was no future in shamanism. I had no desire to become this guy's apprentice. I drink more of that stuff. Are you kidding? But he saved my life. So for a year, I spent a year training with him, and I spent 2 years in total living with the Shuar, and then another year up in the Andes with the Quechua people. Never got sick again. I go back all the time. I was just there about a month ago again. So a bunch of people in this room have been to some of these places with me. You can go to my website, johnperkins.org, and come on one of these trips with me. I take people to these places, a lot of cool places, the Kogi of Colombia, the Maya of Guatemala. And after I got out of the Peace Corps and I became a chief economist, an economic hitman, traveling around the world, I would always try to take time out and study with shamans in other places. And what I learned over and over is that shamanism is all about perception. And what I've learned since is modern psychology is all about perception. Science is all about perception. Quantum physics, the stuff we've been hearing about this morning, it's all about perception. So I think we can say, when we talk about these two kinds of perception, objective reality, spit beer, squirming white grubs, perception, it'll kill you. Objective reality it creates, it was killing me. Take that same objective reality, spit beer and squirming white grubs, it makes you healthy. It's very nutritious, which it is. And you create a new reality. It makes you healthy. And we see this throughout life. The perception is what creates reality in our world. And more we're coming to this conclusion all over. We heard all about that from everybody this morning, essentially. So we have taken a perception. 1976 is when this perception really impacted us, that has created a failing system that we must change. And again, I'm going to hold this teaser out there to you. Before I go into what happened in 1976, how did we get there? And I think that's the other side of my story as an economic hitman. So as an economic hitman, after I got out of the Peace Corps, I became an economist for a big consulting firm. And I did what I'd been trained in business school, what I've been taught is the right thing to do. If you want to help a developing country get rich, become more prosperous, the model is you put a lot of, you arrange for a World Bank loan or some loan, and you build infrastructure. So my job was to identify third world countries that had resources our corporations covet, like oil, arrange huge loans to that country, but the money never actually went to the country. None of it, not a cent. It went to our own corporations, the Bechtels, the Halliburtons, the Brown and Roots, the Stone and Websters, to build big infrastructure projects in these countries. Power plant systems, highways, industrial parks, things that first of all benefited our companies, they made huge profits, Second of all, it benefited a few wealthy families, but hurt the majority of the people because money was diverted from education, healthcare, social services in order to pay the interest on the debt. So we earlier saw these graphs about how per capita income in developing countries. We've made that happen. I made that happen. It's a system. It's an imperialistic system. And in the end, the loan is never paid off. The principal is never paid off, and that's intended. So now we go back to the country. I go back to the country and say, hey, since you can't pay your debts, sell your resource, oil or whatever, real cheap to our corporations without any environmental or social regulations. Vote with us on the next United Nations vote against Cuba or whatever. Allow us to build a military base on your soil. That way we really created this incredible inequality between the rich and the poor nations of the world. And in the few cases where we economic hitmen fail, where heads of state do not buy into this system, the jackals go in. These are people who either overthrow governments or assassinate their leaders. And this is not a conspiracy theory. The CIA, the US has admitted to doing this with Arbenz of Guatemala, Mossadegh of Iran, Allende of Cuba, Diem of Vietnam, Lumumba of the Congo, on and on. Two of my clients, democratically elected president of Ecuador, Jaime Roldos, and the head of state of Panama, Omar Torrijos, they didn't buy. I couldn't get them to come along with this system, and they were both assassinated, killed in their private plane crashes, which all the evidence indicates that those were assassinations, not accidents. So this is a system that's created what I call today a predatory capitalistic system, out of which has resulted a death economy, an economy that's based on destroying the earth, killing the earth, ravaging the very resources upon which the economy depends, and killing people, warfare. Let's face it, a huge part of our budget and many budgets goes toward that military complex, the threat of war or war itself. It's a death economy, and it's a system that's failing us. When I went to business school before 1976, I was taught that a good CEO makes a decent rate of return for his investors and takes good care of his employees, gives them health care, retirement pensions, takes good care of the local communities, the communities where the corporation works, pays taxes. Imagine that. Donates money to local school systems and recreational facilities, shares the wealth, in other words, performs a public service. And this is something that has a tradition in the United States that goes back to our very founding fathers. For the first 100 years, we were a nation. No corporation could get a charter in any state until it guaranteed that it would serve a public interest. Charters lasted on average 10 years, and then the corporation had to go back and prove that it had served a public interest and would continue to do so. That all changed, as Danny mentioned this morning, in the late 1800s. John D. Rockefeller was the institutor of the change, whereby all of this system changed. But by the time I was in business school, there was still that remnant that said, yes, make decent rates of return and be a good public servant. Then, here we go. Are you ready? 1976. Milton Friedman wins the Nobel Prize in economics. Now, Friedman said a lot of things, and I'm not trying to portray him as a bad guy. At the time that he won the Nobel Prize, the world was a very different place. There was very little talk of climate change. We thought that the earth was capable of consuming all the junk we threw at it, all the trash we threw in the oceans or into the air, into the earth. Friedman said the only responsibility of business is to maximize profits, regardless of the social and environmental costs. Very different from what I was taught in business school. Very different from what everyone before me had been taught. And it has created this system of predatory capitalism where the only goal is to maximize stockholder profits. And it has created this death economy, an economy that is totally ravaging the earth, ravaging human beings, treading on everybody in the third world and many people in our world, as we all know. So what's the solution? Change the perception. That's all we got to do. Move into a life economy. Now, basically, all the stuff today that Foster was outlining is part of a life economy. Thank you, Foster, for that, wherever you are. Thank you, Foster. Working on creating a life economy, an economy that's based on regenerating destroyed environments, cleaning up pollution, new technologies that recycle, and new technologies in energy and transportation and communications that don't tear up the earth. We're just beginning this. It just happened within the last year or so that solar is now a lot cheaper than most fossil fuel-fired energy. Yeah. That's recent. But I got to tell you, the solar technology that's out there now, 10 years from now, it's going to look like stuff that came out of the caveman era. You know, and this is part of what Foster's people are working on, is how do we keep moving forward with new technologies that are part of a life economy? An economy that is actually, in itself, a renewable resource. And that's the economy that the Shuar had in the Amazon. That's the economy that human beings have had most of our history until the last few hundred years. And still there's plenty of people in places like the Amazon, well, not that many anymore, but there's still some that have that. And that's where we're moving. It's where we have to move. And all it takes is a change of perception. All it takes is for us to convince these corporations, who incidentally control the world. It's the corporations, it's business that runs the world. It isn't our governments. Our governments are controlled by big corporations. You all know that, don't you? The good news is corporations are just us. There's nothing evil about them. They're just groups of people. Maybe some of them are a little too big. Maybe we can change that and become more local. There's a lot of things we can do. But the fact of the matter is corporations are operating under a perception which occurred in 1976 when Friedman won the Nobel Prize in Economics. This had been building up for a while before then. But when he won that Nobel Prize, suddenly Ronald Reagan, Margaret Thatcher, many world leaders bought into this is the only goal of business, is to maximize profits. And most of us, in a way, have bought into that, or are part of that system. But that's just a perception. And it's a very, very, very new perception in human consciousness. And it's an easy perception for you and me to change. Are you ready to change it? Yes. Okay. So, how do we do that? How do we move into this new area? How do we move out of a failed economic system? And when I talk about the economic system, this is also the political system. It's the whole human social system today, pretty much, to a large degree, that's based on this concept of maximization of profits, of always winning, of always getting better, of always getting bigger. And I also wanted to say that back in the first 400 years that the United States was a country, not only could no corporation get a charter unless it proved it was going to serve a public interest, but businesses couldn't buy each other. That was prohibited by law. And it was John D. Rockefeller who came along, went to the states of Delaware and New Jersey, and he said, hey, you know, I'm developing oil. Oil can't operate like this. We need more than 10 years, and we need to be able to consolidate financial and technical resources. So if you in Delaware and Pennsylvania change the law, my companies will pay taxes. You legislators can give yourself big raises. They did. And then just about every other state followed. And Rockefeller set about buying or destroying all of his competitors, consolidating the oil business. And this then opened the door to monopolistic enterprises all over. This is the heritage then. And we've gone through periods of ups and downs. Teddy Roosevelt was the trust break buster, and then his cousin Franklin did some things, but we've been going up and down. We're at a period right now with this new administration, with all the turmoil that we've been going through. I think we're at a period of stirring the pot. And you know, when you go through a revolution, and we are in a revolution, make no doubt about it. It's the only reason we're here at this conference. It's every place I speak around the world is part of that revolution. But when you go into a revolution, there's got to be turmoil. There's got to be chaos. Chaos theory says that out of chaos comes order. So what our job is to make sure that the order moves in the right direction, that we move into the direction of a life economy. We transform this economic system, this social system, this political system that's inhabited the globe from amongst human beings. We transform it from a system that's really become totally self-destructive, that's consuming itself into extinction, into a system that is a sustainable, renewable resource. And this is important, and we have fun doing it. Are you having fun here? There you go. I am so goddamn effing angry. I've been angry a good deal of my life, and I used to get out on the streets and fight against the Vietnam War and get banged over the head by cops and hurt, and it was destructive and self-destructive. I'm still really angry at our corporations and our government, but do I look it? I'm having fun with it. What's important about emotions is where you direct the energy. So I choose to direct my energy to writing books and to hanging out with people like you. And that is so much fun. And there's so many things we can do. So what do we do to turn this death economy into a life economy? Well, first of all, we understand that it's an old story. And everything is based on story. Science is a story. It's all a story. Right now, earlier speakers, and you can pick up anything. I was just speaking with Deepak Chopra, and I were together. He and Menes Kafatos have come out with a new book, You Are the Universe, where they claim that consciousness created the universe. And the three of us were together in the Bahamas about a little over a month ago, speaking at an event there. And, it's so how everybody now is coming to this conclusion that it really is all about consciousness. It's all about perception. And what created the universe that was asked earlier today, we're exploring these things on such a huge, amazing basis now. We are truly transiting into a new species. There's no question about it. Again, Gary Zakhoff talks about this in his books, about how we're just entering this new species. And so one of the things to understand is how much power each of you has. We have incredible power to turn this thing around because it's all about perception. So what can each of us do individually? What can you do? Not knowing, and we're going to tomorrow at the intensive sessions, probably we'll go into this more. Now, I'm not saying don't go to Danny's. I'm not saying that at all. I want to go to Danny's. Anyway, we're going to go into this more and more. And the New Confessions of an Economic Hitman, which I wrote 12 years after the old Confessions, because it starts off by saying I wrote a new book because things have gotten so much worse in the last 12 years. The things I described in that book that we did in the developing world have come back to haunt us, and then all the economic hitman tools have come back to haunt us in the United States, Europe, and the rest of the world. But the other part of the book is 15 chapters devoted to a strategy of how we turn this around, including lists of what you can do, what students can do, a list of what students can do, what corporate executives can do, what parents can do, what teachers. There's all these lists, and tomorrow we can go into a little bit of that. But I think the most important thing, first of all, is to understand that you have incredible power. Each and every one of us has that power. I often think of people in my life that I look at as heroes. Rosa Parks. How many of you know who Rosa Parks was? Yeah. Well, what did Rosa Parks do? She walked to the front of a bus. She did a lot of other things too. But that was the most significant thing she did. You can do that. And I often think of the woman who wrote Silent Spring. How many of you have heard of Rachel Carson? Who was Rachel Carson? A woman who sat down at a little desk in a little house in Pennsylvania and took up a pencil and a scratch paper and started writing, having no idea her book would ever be published. Forget about changing the world. She started a whole environmental movement. You can do that. And how many of you have ever heard of, Richard Smith or Jack Woodbury? Jack Woodbury, Richard Smith, Mrs. Schneer. How many of you ever heard of those people? Oh my God. I thought this was an educated group here. Well, Richard and Jack were my high school English and history teachers. And Mrs. Schneer was my third grade teacher. And without them, I would never have written a book, not one. I had 12, 10, 9, some number out there. Without them, I wouldn't be here. Richard and Jack taught me the power of the written word that changes history. The pen is more powerful than the sword. And Mrs. Schneer taught me how to stand up to a bully in third grade. And I got to say that that's what it's all about today, is using the power of the pen, although today it's a computer, which is much mightier than the power of the sword, and standing up to bullies. So all of you are Jacks and Richards and Mrs. Schneers. It's third grade, so I don't know her first name. How many of you are teachers? Okay, I want to rephrase that. Every one of you is a teacher, because we go out of here and you're going to talk to people. You're going to be teaching. How many of you are teachers? Yeah, all right. So we're going to teach this. We're going to teach new perception, aren't we? Yes. We're going to get that word out there. So one of the most important things every one of us can do is constantly tell a new story. Tell the story of a life economy that we have to transit from, and we are transiting. We're making that happen. We've seen examples of that this morning all around us. The people selling things out here represent that. How do we move into a life economy? Imagine. Well, first of all, it would be nice to get rid of General Dynamics and some of the Raytheon and some of those military organizations, but what if we took another route? What if we paid General Dynamics and Raytheon to, instead of making missiles and war equipment, what if we paid them to come up with ways to mine all the plastic that's floating in the oceans? What if we paid them to clean up all the oil that's leaked in every gas station in the world and every petroleum development site? Pay someone to clean all that up and let's recycle all that oil. And what if we paid other corporations to clean up all the pollution that's around? What if, whether you like taxes or not, we got into that this morning. I'm not going to get into that. But the fact of the matter is, April 15th is close upon us. What if those tax dollars, instead of going to the military, went to cleaning up pollution, went to coming up with new technologies? I would be more than happy to pay my taxes for that. And there's so many opportunities out here for us to come up with a whole new economic system. I give a lot of talks at MBA programs, and the young people are really, really getting it. A nonprofit I founded 2 nonprofits, Dream Change and Pachamama Alliance. How many of you know either one of those? Probably most of you know more Pachamama Alliance. Great organization. Go to our website, also dreamchange.org. We've got this Love Summit. It's the second one. The first one was in Portland. The second one's in Cincinnati. That's oriented toward business executives and young entrepreneurs to teach them that we have to bring love into business. Love of the earth, love of each other, love of the planet, a life economy, the life economy. Go to dreamchange.org. Join us, please. So, continuing with this, I'm trying to summarize a few things. This is a long list, and we can discuss them more tomorrow. But one thing that every one of us must do as we're moving into this, you must follow your passion. Go into your heart. What makes your heart sing? Because burnout doesn't work. A lot of you, I'm sure, like me, have been in environmental and social movements where people get burned out. It doesn't work. We've got to go to the bliss, as Joseph Campbell would say. We've got to follow our bliss. So follow your passion. I love to write. I like to get up in front of people and talk like this, as you can probably tell. I like to do that, so that's what I do. But if you're a carpenter, use carpentry to teach about sustainability. If you're a plumber, do it that way. If you're a teacher, use that. If you're a parent, use that. If you're retired, how much golf and tennis can you play? This is the time to follow your heart and mentor the young people and get out there and use what talents you've had to do to follow your dream, to really go deep into that passion. And something else we all can and must do is constantly question authority. Constantly. Yeah. I've been accused sometimes of not being patriotic because of the books I write. I say, on the contrary, I think I'm the most patriotic person I know. Democracy demands that we question our leaders, even the ones we like. One of the biggest problems I think Obama had was his supporters didn't question him enough. We didn't support him. Questioning is supporting when we do it in the right way. So let's constantly question authority. Tell a new story, question authority, and understanding that corporations control the world. Pick a corporation. If every one of you in this room picks a corporation that you would like to see changed, Exxon, Walmart, Nike, Monsanto. What the hell's wrong with Monsanto? Pick a corporation, yes. And every single week, at least once a week, send that corporation an email. Try to make it somewhat nice. That may be tough with Monsanto. It's easier with Nike. For example, I do this with Nike, and I know the president of Nike. Nike, I love your products, but I'm not going to buy them anymore until you pay your workers in Indonesia a fair wage. Send that, and also send it to everybody on your social networking list, and ask them to send it to everybody on their list and have all of them send this to Nike. I speak at a lot of corporate conferences. Recently, I was speaking to 90 real estate billionaires in Southern California at their annual dinner. And incidentally, out of these 90, 89 of them were white men. There was one white woman. And, you know, and I said, well, that's a long story, I'm running out of time, maybe tomorrow, but one of the things I said when I speak to these people, your people, I'm not going to pull any punches. I've talked a lot about what I have here, and what I hear from these people afterwards at the receptions when we're drinking a few beers or wine or whatever, is what I hear from them is so many of them say, we want to do better. I've got grandchildren, they say. I want to create a green world, but I'm afraid that if I lose 0.5% of market share, my top stockholders will fire me and replace me with someone who only cares about market share. Mark Parker, who is president of Nike, has said, I really want to pay our workers a fair wage, but it will cost us some market share in the short run. And if that happens, I love it when the music plays. When I'm making a really good point and the music out there plays, that's So Mark Parker says, so please ask everybody to send me emails. Thousands of them. When I have 100,000 emails saying, Nike, you've got to pay your workers a fair wage or we're not going to buy any more from you, and I take these to Phil Knight, then things will happen. So please, make a commitment right now. Pick a corporation, any corporation that you want to see change. Make a commitment to starting a consumer campaign. Be nice. I love your products or whatever, and I'm not going to buy any more from you until. This has tremendous power. When I was a kid, there was apartheid in South Africa. We boycotted companies that supported it or threatened to. It ended. Couldn't walk beside the river in Boston, the Charles River, when I was going to business school there. It stank too much. Doesn't anymore. You can swim in it now. It's damn cold, so you probably wouldn't want to, but you could. We have tremendous power to turn things around. You and I live at the most exciting time in human history, the greatest revolution that's ever happened on this planet, a consciousness revolution. You're it. I'm it. We're all in this together. It's an incredibly blessed time to be alive. We have the opportunity to rise to new levels of consciousness that human beings have never before seen. And I've also written a number of books on indigenous cultures. Every indigenous culture that I know, and I've studied and worked with them on every continent except Antarctica, every one of them has a prophecy that we've entered a time now with the potential to rise to higher levels of consciousness. The potential. But we have to make it happen. Are you ready to make it happen? Yes. That's what Architects for a New Paradigm is all about. This is the new paradigm. We rise to this higher level of consciousness where we really turn things around, change the perception. It's really not a big deal. We can do it. So I want to end with a quote that, if I can find it, that I love. It's over 200 years old, still very relevant. 1776, George Washington had lost just about every battle he ever fought. The Continental Congress wouldn't give him shoes or blankets or guns or bullets or anything else. He's hunkered down in Valley Forge. Pretty depressing situation. And a while before that, Tom Paine had written something quite brilliant. Washington ordered it read to all of his men at Valley Forge around Christmas time. So this is it. This is part of it. And I think it's as relevant today as it was then. And as important and as inspiring. December 1776. This is read to the men at Valley Forge, written by Tom Paine. These are the times that try men's souls. The summer soldier and the sunshine patriot will, in this crisis, shrink from the service of their country. But he who stands by it now deserves the love and thanks of man and woman. A generous parent should say, if there must be trouble, let it be in my day that my child may have peace. If there must be trouble, let it be in our day that our children may have peace. I love the man or woman, Paine goes on, who can smile in trouble, who can gather strength from distress and grow brave by reflection. By perseverance and fortitude, we have the prospect of a glorious future. By perseverance and fortitude, we have the prospect of a glorious future. I have a 9-year-old grandson named Grant who lives next door to me, 5 minutes away up on Bainbridge Island, Puget Sound. And I think the reason we're all here today is so when Grant is my age, a couple of centuries from now, about 6 decades from now, he can look back and say, thank God all those people came together in Ashland, Oregon, and they were the architects of the new paradigm. And thank God for all of you being here. Thank you all for being here. I look forward to hanging out with you. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you.
Now, I gotta say, if spit beer consistently ignites passion and articulation and vision like this, send me a keg. Okay.
I'll do that.
Wow. Wow.
That was amazing.